Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where we talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Quantum Leap Season 2, Episode 4. A great episode. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So this leap ended up being kind of what I thought it was going to be, but kind of not. Because I thought, like, alright, with everything the guy was saying at the end of last episode, and we find out this episode the guy's name is Neil, when he was giving off all those lines and stuff, I was like, are we going to find out? There's no way this is what we think it is. There's no way they're about to rob or hurt anyone. I was like, is this an acting thing? And he is. I thought Ben was going to be an actor too, but it turns out no. He's an agent named Summer, who is the assistant to Neil's agent. But yeah, Neil's an actor, played by Tim Matheson. He's one of those actors where I'm like, I see him, I'm like, I've definitely seen you and stuff, and I skimmed through his filmography. I just did a quick skim, so I wasn't quite sure, but I'm sure there's stuff here and there. He's done quite a bit of voice acting over his career as well. Had no idea until I looked into it. He's the original voice for Johnny Quest with the original animated 1960 series. I was like, that's so interesting. Had no idea. That was interesting. But either way, Neil's supposed to be on Leno and everything, so but he ends up missing that appearance. He goes sailing, he disappears for like a week, and then sadly, they will find him dead. So now it's up to Ben to try and make that future not happen. In fact, I think this episode does such a great job of combining, obviously pushing the plot forward on a personal level for so many of our characters, but also, there's so many relationship dynamics and complications, because there's Ben's circumstances with Addison and obviously Tom, and we'll get into all of that, but especially because this leap is kind of important to both Addison and Ben, because they love Neil's movies. They are big fans of his movies. Ben has his favorite, Addison has her favorites, but obviously it's Ben's obviously going through the breakup situation with Addison. It's kind of hard to be. It's because that's also a tough thing about it is it's not even. It wasn't even like they broke up. She thought he was dead and she moved on. For him, it's only been 3 days. For her, it's been 3 years. So that, it's kind of just been trudging along despite everything. So, but it turns out Neil's motivation, what kind of sparked all of this, is that he's going to try and win back his ex. He shows up there, and it turns out her new beau, which they do, because this is 2000, so it's they're still married present day, but it turns out that new beau of hers is a co-star, because apparently they were co-stars on a particular show. I think it's the same one that Ben and Addison are fans of, but one of their co-stars is who she's marrying now, so I'm sure that's kind of salt in the wound, which is this neat parallel, because Tom is now working at Quantum Leap, which we'll get to in a second, so there's just so many direct parallels, and Ben, it's you know what I'm going to help you do, Neil? I'm going to help you, get back, Laura. And it's he was kind of reluctant at first, but it's Ben's this is true love. This is obviously Ben's taking a lot of him and putting it in his sleep, which this wouldn't be the first time. I mean, obviously that's kind of the story structure of the type of show anyway, but Ben's kind of going even further in this case, which Adam says having a hard time juggling that, because it's no, that's not what we're meant to do. And Ben has to bring up the fact is well, yeah, I ended up getting a bounty hunter and her boyfriend back together. I'm isn't that the episode with Justin Hartley from the first season? I think that might be the episode in particular they're referencing. And it's someone didn't agree with that decision. And she's I didn't say I didn't agree with you doing that. I just said that wasn't the actual mission. And, obviously ended up playing a role in that. But Ben's just doing everything to kind of say, be oh, I'll use this as an example. One example. Notice that it's the only example you ended up using, referencing your leaping and stuff, because usually him and Addison are pretty on the same page about it, and it's obviously there have been some disagreements on how to approach things, and this being one of them, and Addison going to Tom trying to figure out how to handle this, because for Addison, it's once again, it's Ben's so adamant about things being one way, and she doesn't know how to do it, but it's no, Tom is coming from the perspective of, because he's in this complicated spot himself, but he's like, Ben has shown that he can figure these leaps out time and time again. He's got a pretty good track record, so I'm going to trust his instincts, but even if he loses the plot, I know you'll be there to kind of figure things out, to kind of put him back on the path that he's supposed to be on, so. But yeah, like, Ben went with, Neil, like, obviously getting, like, a certain person to play music. Wasn't it like an opera singer or something else? A whole bunch of flowers, and ended up taking, like, a suit from the TV show that they met through, but also the suit, it's also the same suit he got married in. I can't remember if their characters were married too, but whatever the case may be, it's on this wax figure, which, you know, especially an actor in his situation of like, right, I've had this long, extensive career, but it's kind of been waning over the past few years. Even Addison was like, right, he's kind of given this, like, you know, perspective, like, you know, people when he passed was like, oh my God, he was a legend. But it's like, sadly, his career was slightly on the decline, because he's right now putting out a memoir, which I love the way Magic says it, because like Ernie puts some swag on it. He's like, a memoir, like there's some like gravitas and swag to the way he says it, because I always say like memoir, like I kind of put nothing fancy on it, and I just kind of like dull it out, but it's like, oh, you should probably say that word memoir, like put a little oomph in it. And I was like, I'm gonna start doing that from now on because of Ernie Hudson. But yeah, he's supposed to be like on Leno talking about his memoir, and like I said, it's just the mortality of like, oh yeah, you have this younger wax figure, even though it hasn't really caught your essence, there's something still in the eyes, and it's just kind of like, hey, coming face to face with like supposed to be a younger version of yourself, and here you are all these years. Like it's a complicated thing. So funny enough, that memoir is actually what led to the truth behind all of this. I think it's a combination of the two. I think Ben was right to kind of take the approach he was having, but it was also he needed to listen to Addison, because I think it is a necessary journey for Neil to go through, which led to the end result. But, you know, because going through the memoir, Tom is the one that ended up finding out that he was with a specific like actress, like from their theater days or Broadway days or something like that. Well, turns out they broke up, but she ended up having a daughter, and Neil's daughter, and some of the letters that were returned that were at the beginning of the episode, that's what really kind of sparked all that. It wasn't just a wedding invite. He's probably already aware of it, and it probably rubbed him the wrong way, but that was just kind of, it was an example of like, these are like, his daughter has sent the letters back and without opening them, because she didn't want to, you know, it's like, you went 30 years not having a relationship with me, why start now? And so it is that conversation of mortality catching up on you, and like, once again, past mistakes. So it isn't just about Laura, it's also about his daughter, but he's putting all his eggs on the Laura thing, just like Ben is with the whole Addison of it all, like that being kind of like a big motivator for him. Not motivator, but just kind of this sticking point that's kind of stuck with him. Obviously, like, he's had to kind of quickly just kind of, once again, kind of get over it, but obviously you can tell he's not over it, because it is kind of like we're walking on eggshells around each other. We're not really bringing it up. We're just kind of talking around it, bits and pieces here and there. So it's actually really sad when Ben blows up at Addison and him getting mad at her. Once again, it's 3 years. I mean, because that line of when is someone allowed to move on? The reason why Ben's saying that now, it's like, because even Addison had to be like, oh, it's hard for you, Ben? You have no idea what I went through. When they were about to shut us down, you know what I tried to do? I tried to get into the accelerator because I thought maybe it would fling me to where you were. Like, I was in a bad place, you know? And it took her a while to kind of crawl back after that. So don't act like it was just hard on you. Once again, you've had to deal with this for 3 days. Like, yes, but life went on without you. I'm sorry. And it's not Addison's fault. And even Ben knew in that moment when he yelled at her, but it's just like, once again, it is a situation where we can't invalidate his feelings. It's a complicated thing, but it isn't something that should fall on Addison, because if the circumstances were different, Ben would probably be like, I would want you to move on to be happy. But for him, he just got blindsided. Because, no, I was going for a couple, what do you mean it's been 3 years? Like, that's crazy whiplash. But it also, once again, so it is just, no one's the bad guy in this situation. I don't think Addison's wrong for doing what she did. I also don't think Ben's wrong to feel the way, everyone's feelings in this situation are valid, you know? And it's such a sad and complicated love story in that regard, you know? I mean, sometimes that's also just, I mean, even in TV shows, like, even the relationships, you're like, oh, this is going to work all the way through. It's like, I mean, we'll have to wait to see how this goes down, but maybe just like Tom and Addison are in game, and maybe there will be no Ben and Addison ever again. Maybe, maybe not. I mean, because she'd even make the argument, it's like, because for him, he tried to throw in her face, like, I literally, like, did all this to save you. It's like, yes, but you also did this without telling her. It's, like, understandable, but it's still, like, it's so effed up to throw that in her face now, and he knows he was wrong. It's just, you're angry, emotions are flying. I still think it's super fucked up for him to, like, kind of throw that in her face. And even Ian's like, oh, it's kind of not cool of Ben to do that, but even Addison's like, yeah, no, like, it was like, because she's like able to see, like, yes, we're both people who are hurt in this situation. It's not, that's the thing, like, none of us are, like, in that moment, it's just a heartbreaking moment, but it's like, no one in this situation is a bad guy. It's not like Ben's the bad guy, and it's not like Addison's the bad guy. It's just life and fate and destiny, and just life turned out in an effed up way. And sometimes that's all it takes to ruin a relationship. It's not necessarily anyone did anything wrong. It's just life just pulls you in different directions, sadly. And I think Ben had put all his hopes of, like, him and Addison on Neil and Laura patching things up. So Neil shows up, does his grand gesture, and even Laura's like, are you okay? Like, all this grand gesture stuff, it's like, she's like, you seem like you're so lost. So when she's talking to Neil, who Ben is standing right behind him, and who's standing right behind Ben is Addison. So it's almost like when she's saying those words, you can see they cut through Neil, and they pierce Ben as well, because, like, it's something they both needed to hear. And he even turned around and apologized. Addison's like, you have nothing to apologize for. He's just like, I didn't listen to you. Because it isn't just this leap. He even kind of was, because he was still reeling from everything last leap in episode 3 as well. He was still kind of shitty to her, not really listening to her there either. And now even more so in this leap. Yeah, it worked out last time, but once again, he was extremely reckless last episode, and he kind of said some shit to Addison that made her go like, okay, fine, I'll work with you, but it's still like, it's all been boiling up these past few episodes, and now it just finally all came out. And so Ben's like, I'm sorry, I haven't been listening to you, I yelled at you, that was not right, to take all my frustrations about the situation out on you when you did nothing wrong. Because he also found out Tom is working at Quantum Leap, and he's also watching the leap, which is kind of like, it twisted the knife more and more for Ben. I mean, to be fair, if it wasn't for Tom, the team wouldn't be here, because Tom's the one that got the lights put back on. So it's like Tom, that's the thing. I mean, until proven otherwise, Tom seems like a legit nice guy, especially when we find out, oh, his wife died. So he's going through, I guess that's, I don't remember if that was brought up in episode 1 or not, that they met through trauma. Like, maybe it's like they met during a grieving. It might have just been like just general military stuff that ended up bringing them together, because he's a military guy, she's a military person. So I wonder if that, because I was about to say, like, could it, because his wife died, and so he knows what it's like to lose someone that is so significant to you in that capacity. So I'm sure that brought them even closer together. They were able to kind of, you can't fill that hole completely. All you can do is make room in the other side of that person's heart. You know, a heart's big enough to love multiple people, I believe. And it's just like, right, this hole in your heart from their respective situation, his wife dying, her thinking Ben was dead and having to bury him and give a eulogy. It's like, Tom's not trying to replace that part of her heart, finding a space in the other side of her heart, like never trying to fill that void. It's a delicate balance. And, you know, he's kind of shown himself to be a decent enough dude trying to walk that line of, you know, being in her heart, but also trying not to, like, fill that Ben void in whatever case. And I'm sure the other way around is, like, he's not trying to get Addison to fill that hole in his heart. That's how I'm seeing it, you know. But either way, like I said, Ben had put kind of all his eggs in one basket. Like I said, of just like kind of like if he could get Neil happy, like what could that mean for him and Addison? But kind of being like Laura's words cutting so deep made him go like gave him a rude awakening, both him and Neil. And Neil's like, I'm gonna go sailing, and Ben takes him to see his daughter, and he's like, dude, she doesn't want to see me. She doesn't want to have anything to do with me. Like, what if she's angry? Like, what if, he's like, I've made a lot of mistakes. What if she, turns me away? And you hear Addison in the back being like, she won't. She will let you in. And then Ben uses her as an example. He's like, right, there's someone I know who had a complicated, because I was about to say that. I was like, having Addison be in the background saying that, it's like, it means a lot because, as we learned in the first season, how complicated her relationship with her father was. But she got a lot of closure last season, getting to see, like, obviously a younger version of him. But it was a nice, it led to a lot of closure for Addison. And I thought that was, being able to kind of, once again, take these experiences that you've been through and these conversations, and it's like, right, and he talked about how Addison felt about the whole situation, what it meant to her to be able to do this. So it's like, all you can do is start by saying, I'm sorry. That's what you can start from there, and we'll just see where, like, the cards lie afterwards. And it seems like ultimately they do make up. He's still in his daughter's life all these years later, ends up being a grandparent. So it all works out in the end, So it was this very beautiful thing. But the end result is that, it's like, oh, he ended up making like 7 more movies that we can watch. And Ben was like, wait. And she's like, I'm sorry. He's like, no. The fact of the matter is I kind of have to be able to move on. And I can't do that with you being my hologram. Which is such a tough thing to ask Addison to walk away from it. Because, for one, all of season 1, I've been through... with the exception of episode 1, I've been by your side through every leap. With the exception of episode 1. And to not be there with you at the end, it's complicated, I mean, now that you're asking me to walk away, especially because I came back because of the trauma of thinking you were dead and losing you, and I could be okay if I know I'm by your side guiding you, because if I didn't do the best I could to help you, then, it's a little bit of kind of similar to the thing with her dad. Like, this whole being by Ben's side again is kind of a little closure for her in so many different ways. And now kind of being asked to take a step back. I know that's rough, but I think both her and Ben need and deserve that, It's like, it's still like, it's just not going to be the easiest thing to do, And I think eventually she will go back to being his hologram, and it's like, we are a good team. I mean, to be fair, he's had moments with the others, so I don't know if, like, going forward, if it'll just be a rotation. Eventually, just for dramatic purposes, eventually Tom is going to be in that, in there being his hologram. It's going to be complicated, but yeah. But it's like, yeah, the others have kind of already been by his side. I don't think Magic hasn't been there. I know Ian and Jen has. I know Jen specifically was there for one of Ben's leaps last season, and obviously Ian's been there for like what, at least 2. The one in episode 2, and I don't remember. There was definitely another one in season 1 that Ian was there as well. But yeah, that's kind of heartbreaking. So, and this is one of those instances we don't see what Ben's next leap is, so don't quite know what to expect going into the next episode. But we're not done yet. There's still some other conversation pieces to have about this episode. Tom had this interesting conversation with Magic about the whole, because like, right, they have to prove that Quantum Leap deserves to kind of stay open and keep going, and they have to prove that to the government, and that's kind of partially his role here too, in that capacity. And he ends up talking to Magic about, like, right, like, the unpredictability and powerlessness you feel in life sometimes. In his case, when his wife died, like, that powerlessness, he thought, like, right, when you're a part of a thing that has to deal with time travel, you never thought you'd have to deal with powerlessness again, but here you are. I mean, they've had to deal with that where, like, stuff has happened with Ben that they couldn't directly help him in a lot of ways. I mean, that's why he was, they lost track of him, sadly, for years because of that stuff. So you would think like, oh, in a situation where time travel is possible, that you'd be able to not feel powerless. But it's like he was kind of feeling a little powerless in the moment to really help Addison or Ben in this situation, but more so Addison during the complicated nature of him and Ben. But he also brings up a really interesting perspective. He's like, when it came to Sam and when it came to Ben, we've always been under the assumption that something was wrong with the technology, but he's like, what if that's what this is all about? What time travel is really about? It's about sacrifice, that the fact is this is always meant to be a one-way trip that you kind of have to make just to kind of make things right with time and do right. Like you were chosen for a reason, and it's always meant to be this sacrifice of like maybe Ben and Sam are never meant to come home, that this is their life, that this is the path they're meant to go down to make right what was once wrong type of situation, right? So I thought that was an interesting perspective, that it isn't just going to stop with Ben, that maybe a future person who gets into the machine will do the same thing. And Magic's kind of like, yeah, that's just kind of like that he believes that even someone knowing the dangers of this being a one-way trip would still make that decision in the future. And I was literally about to call him Adam, Jesus. Once again, that's his character's name from Yellow Jackets, because I can separate, because that's a live action show, so like I don't have to worry about accidentally being like Shanks, like I don't have to worry about making that mistake. But Tom, and he says like, yes, that's exactly what we're going to tell the government about this, to kind of prove the continued like why quantum leap's so important. So I thought that was so interesting conversation. We also catch up with Ian because he was asked by Tom. He's like, yo, like, why are these power surges happening? It's like, oh, that happens every time Ben is leaping. It takes like a lot of power to like track him after. He's like, yeah, but these power surges are higher than what was 3 years ago. So you could tell something was up, because it seemed like Ian was like either caught off guard by it, but also seemed like he might have an idea. And he looks further into it and has to meet up with Rachel. And it turns out that the reason why he was able to the reason why they were able to find Ben is because Ian ended up making a deal with Rachel's boss and getting a very powerful chip, and that's what helped them locate Ben. The extra power that's getting used now is apparently there's some data for every time Ben leaps, more of that data is getting sent back to our boss, and you're like, that's an interesting plot thread. So that's going to be something they're going to be... Because obviously last season, they had their present day threads that they were dealing with. Obviously with the Leaper X, Martinez of it all, as well as Janice of it all. But that being like another like new present day plot thread is definitely going to be interesting to see where that goes. And obviously, once again, I brought it with the whole relationship stuff. That does complicate things between Rachel and Ian, which is so sad, because this is our first episode being like, oh, Ian and Rachel, they got back together, because they were in a very, obviously, Ian kind of reached out last season, and we saw kind of that repairing of that bridge, and now it's like, oh, they're back together, that's sweet. And just for us to find out, oh, cool, the same episode they had their falling out, because it turns out that Ian didn't tell her that Ben was found. It's like, oh, I want to keep you out of the loop. That way, when your boss asks you stuff, you don't have to. But it's like, no. This is you, like, being unable to change, which is, once again, it parallels so nicely with this episode where it's just kind of like you kind of get in your own way type of situation, where it's like Ben kind of got in his own way this episode, Neil kind of got in his own way, kind of the refusal to change in some regards, and Ben and Neil kind of start heading in the direction of change, but Ian kind of hasn't. And it's like Ian was trying to do... It's like, I had this secret, I was just trying to protect you, but honestly, it's just because I didn't give you the chance to tell you the truth. It's like, things could have been different, And it's like, it's just kind of like we find ourselves in this cycle again. It's like, you haven't changed, so... I don't know if they're like broken up, or maybe they were never like officially together again. But it seemed like there was something there, that spark had been reignited. So, but it seems like this is the big secret that Jen and Ian had. It's because Jen was like, "Yo, I told you when you first got that chip to check it for." It's like, yes, I get it, but the only reason why it's active now is because they found Ben, and Ben is sleeping now. So I guess it was probably hidden somewhere in the code of this chip that it's like, yeah, there's nothing. It's probably no way you would have been able to find it because this aspect of it was so buried, but also it was inactive. The only reason why Ian found it now is because it's active, and they probably would have never noticed it if Tom hadn't brought up like the power surge. But like, okay, well, what's different now between now and 3 years ago? Well, I know that chip's different, but why? What else is right? So I'm curious to find out who Rachel's boss is and what that necessarily means. That might tie into some other elements I've kind of theorized about this season. Having not seen any trailers or any promotion, because I avoided all it because I want to go in knowing as little as possible. But this present day thread with Rachel's boss could turn out to be related to something else I've kind of theorized about the show. I could see these threads potentially connecting in some regard, especially with some of the information because it's some of the information, but it's not all of the information getting transported back. Because even with the little they're getting, it doesn't quite tell Rachel's boss about what the Quantum Leap project's fully about, but because that was her point, like, oh, as long as like you haven't found Ben, it's not an issue. It's like, well, Ben's been found, so a lot of that data might still be getting transmitted. So what they were going to, Jen and Ian's plan is like, right, we just kind of put up a firewall, and eventually, I guess, being like, well, eventually Rachel's boss is going to notice, so it's going to buy them some time to figure this out. But it's a Band-Aid on this continuously bleeding wound that is this circumstance. So some very, very interesting developments. I'm really curious to see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Obviously, I'm getting to this episode fairly late, so the new episode's already out. So I'm going to try and tackle that today if I can. If not, like, soon enough. But yeah, I'm so far behind on stuff. But anyway, that's a me thing, not a you thing. Regardless, I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.